Which camera is better for video, the Lumix S5iiX or the Sony A7R5? But first, as always, let me know in the comments if you can tell which is which. So I hope you've not cheated and wound it on to find out which was which, but camera A was the Sony and camera B was the Lumix. So these cameras are very far apart when it comes to price. The Lumix is currently around $2,289, depending on where you get it from, and the Sony is $3,999. And yes, the A7R5 is very much a photo first camera, but they've packed a lot of video features, as Sony always does, into that camera. So I wanted to see if you're missing out on anything because you're paying less on the Lumix, or are you missing out on some video features on the Sony because it's more of a photo-centric camera. And hopefully by the time you finish watching this video, you'll have made your mind up and have helped you make a decision on what camera is perfect for you. And please let me know in the comments which one you prefer. We used a mixture of lenses throughout this video to try and keep it as fair as possible, but the thing is, it's very difficult to get a completely fair comparison because we're using such different systems and there's so many different factors that can affect the image and the colors. But whatever camera system you do buy into, you're actually buying into the lenses as well, unless you go down the cinema lens route. So really, these tests do represent what you're gonna get when you buy either of these cameras. So when it comes to autofocus, the Sony offers a lot more options in terms of autofocus modes. So it's gonna track human, birds, insects, car, train, and planes. But like I discussed in this video, Lumix G9 Mark II has actually included some updates to introduce some of those modes as well. I mean, I don't know if they're gonna, but it'd be nice if we saw that update as a firmware update in the S5 Mark II range as well. That would be cool. In terms of overall performance, they're both very good. The only difference I find is that the Lumix looks a little bit more natural. It's smoother to transition. Now you can dial that in, you can change the speed and the sensitivity on both cameras, but I've always found that the Lumix out of the box looks a little bit more natural. The colors is one of the things that's most important to me, the overall image and the colors, but it also can be very subjective, so I'm aware of that. I'm just going to state my opinions on it and give you my thoughts and the things that I've noticed, so bear that in mind. But when I'm color grading, I like to have the most natural and close to life starting point as possible, and then you can add your LUTs or grade it to stylize it. But having that natural starting place I think is key, and I think the Lumix has the most natural colors, and I've always said that Vlog is my favorite profile to work with. Not only is it very natural looking, has great contrast and colors, but it's also really fast, simple and easy to work with. And I still think that the Sony skin colors are still a bit on the pink side, and also the green of the trees is more towards the blue than it is the green, and the greens are very oversaturated on the Sony. I don't know what it is, but look at the wall in the background. It looks a little bit unnatural, and it wasn't like that. It's just way too vibrant for me. And yes, you can go in and change it in post because it's 10-bit color, both great to work with, but it's just an extra step that you have to take in the color grading process, which I don't want to have to do. However, I do prefer the sky in the Sony. It's kind of got a retro look to it. Yes, I was using my retro look pack, but it was just easier to get that point when color grading normally as well. And also the yellows are a little bit muted as well. But the thing is, I still want it to be natural first, and then I can desaturate those yellows if I want to. Sony seems to have this look and colors that sometimes it looks really nice, and then in other situations it just doesn't work, for me personally. That's enough of colours. That's enough now. Everybody calls Sony the king of low light, and that may be true of some of their cameras, but not all of them. Because in the A7R5, it has a dual native ISO of 800 and 2500, which isn't that high. And in the Lumix, it's 640 and 4000. So you do get a little bit more light and less grain in the Lumix. It's going to be a cleaner image. And I don't know why, but it might have something to do with the megapixel. Does it matter why? I don't know. Some people like to know why. Sorry, I don't have all the answers for these things. I feel like I've reached my nerd level. This is enough. This is as far as I want to go. So at 2500 ISO, the noise levels were pretty similar, and that's the Sony's secondary ISO, so it should be cleaner. but it looks the same to me. And then on the Lumix, I can go up to 4000 and the image gets brighter and cleans up. So this does perform a lot better in low light. And I've also noticed that when comparing the Lumix to other Sony cameras, the Lumix tends to hold the colors a lot better in low light. Now, I will say that I was using the wrong white balance indoors, but I had the white balance set exactly the same on both cameras, so it is still a direct comparison. I just wanted to let you know that if it was looking a bit pink, that's why. Lumix has always been the leader when it comes to stabilization, but I must say that Sony are definitely catching up. They've done some great work on the stabilization modes, but there's still some subtle differences to point out. For example, I'm a fan of the normal stabilization mode in the Lumix because it's not trying to do too much. It's just getting rid of those micro jitters that you get from holding the camera or wobbling it slightly. That's really good if you want to achieve a handheld look without rigging your camera out with a full camera cage and everything and adding weight to it. So as you can see in this shot, they were fully handheld. The Sony's got a little bit of wobble. Now it's correcting the micro jitters, but it's still wobbling about. Whereas the Lumix looks very natural and I really like it. Whilst we're still on the normal mode, the Lumix is definitely a lot smoother even on walking shots. At this point on the Sony, it looks like Danny Boy's walking home after a night out. But then when you switch the Sony into active stabilization and the Lumix into e-stabilization, they're both pretty much on par. The Sony performs extremely well. The only difference is there's more of a crop on the Sony. And then you've got boost mode on the Lumix, which is where you want to emulate a tripod shot. You're not meant to walk or move with this mode. It's just to get rid of those micro jitters and it keeps it nice and still. If you do move, it introduces wobble, and you don't want that, but that's not what it's for. But I must say that the active mode on the Sony does a great job of doing the same thing with this. So both great for stabilization. Do you need the boost? Well, it's handy for when you're using long lenses. Lumix also offers anamorphic stabilization, which is fantastic if you want to use anamorphic lenses. And I've found that they work so good. I've got a video all about the Shure lenses here, and all the footage I'm using the anamorphic stabilization, and you can't tell. It looks like it's on a gimbal. It's that good. The rolling shutter looks practically the same on both cameras, but then on some cameras, if you change the resolution, it can get worse. So I tested it on 6K on the Lumix, and to be honest, it was the same as in 4K, so you don't lose anything there. But when you upped it to 8K on the Sony, it did get a lot worse. So that's something to bear in mind if you're buying this camera predominantly for the fact it shoots in 8K, you're gonna sacrifice that rolling shutter and that jello look. Neither camera has a record limit, but the Lumix S5 Mark II and the Mark IIX has built-in fans, so you've got more chance of truly unlimited recording with these cameras. Now, I didn't get a chance to test this side by side, but I'm sure if you look up on YouTube, you'll find plenty of overheating tests with Sonys. I just want to make you aware that a lot of people will say that you can change the setting for the thermal heating mode, or whatever it's called, thermal management mode, but it's not really advised to do that. You shouldn't really push the camera to its limits. Having a fan in is a great benefit. So they both film in 4K up to 60 frames a second, and there is a crop on both cameras at 4K 60. Lumix has 6K while the Sony goes up to 8K. Let me know what you think. Which do you prefer filming in? 4K, 6K or 8K, or even 1080? Which one do you use most of the time and why? What I really like on the Lumix is that it has 3x2 open gate. If you haven't heard me bang on about the open gate before, then just quickly, what I really like about it is it shoots in 6K, which looks fantastic, but it's actually capturing more space above and below the frame of a 16:9, for example, which means I can crop a 16:9 image out of it, or I can crop a vertical image out of it as well. So I no longer have to shoot anything twice for vertical and horizontal content. I've got it all in one go, and it looks great. But then the Lumix also offers a few more codec and recording options, such as Apple ProRes, because you can record to an SSD straight from the camera. So we no longer have to use an external recorder like the Atomos Ninja 5, for example. You can do it all in camera with a smaller, lighter setup without taking as much gear with you, which I think is incredible. Couple of things I really like about the Sony. For example, the variable flip screen. I think that's what they call it, where you can flip it that way and then that way. Like the the normal flip screen was a thing, and now they've got the vari-angle. I think it's even better. I'd love to see that in every camera going forward. And I really like what Sony are doing with their new lenses, where they've got the manual aperture ring. And I also like the new style and the design. It looks very sleek and professional. But I also like how clever Lumix have been, because they've made all the prime lenses the same size, which means you got the same filter thread size, so you don't have to buy different filters or step-up rings all the time, and a very similar weight, so you don't have to rebalance when you're using a gimbal, because that's what a set of cinema prime lenses would be like. They'd be all the same size, all the same weight, same dimensions, so you can change your focus motors nice and quickly and easily. And the Lumix also offers non-linear and linear focus modes if you want to replicate the focus throw of a manual lens. Now, I'm not sure if the Sony has that. Me and Danny Boy were trying to look, but we couldn't find anything. Maybe somebody knows, so let us know in the comments. But this is where Lumix really shines, in its monitoring features. Now, I'm just going to fly through these because I don't want to bore you any more than I probably already have, and I apologise. So you can load in your own custom LUTs to the camera so that you can monitor using your favourite LUTs and make sure your exposure is correct before you even start filming, so you know when you get it into your editing program, it's going to look exactly the way you want it to. And you can also bake those LUTs in using the real-time LUT feature, so you don't even have to ever do any colour grading again. And we've got shutter angle instead of shutter speed if you want. An extra spot metering function, so you can meter 2 different exposure levels at the same time. This is great for shadows and highlights. Then you've got waveforms and vector scopes, but my personal favourite, anamorphic mode. So within the camera, it's got a de-squeeze display. So if you're using anamorphic lenses, you can choose which type you're using, and it's going to display how it's going to look once you've de-squeezed it. And there's not many cameras that do that, especially not for this price range. So again, that gets rid of the need of having to use an external monitor, an extra piece of gear that we don't have to take with us anymore if we don't want to. So which would I buy? If this was my first camera, it'd be really appealing to me that I could almost buy 2 Lumix bodies for the price of one Sony and still know that I'm going to get a fantastic image, great colours, and professional features for next to nothing, basically. I think it's the most value for money that you get in a camera, hands down. Or you could buy one of these cameras and a bunch of prime lenses for the price of just the Sony body alone. So that's something to think about. If you're somebody that's got a certain budget, the lenses are more affordable with the Lumix, the bodies are more affordable with the Lumix. I also know that I haven't spoken much about the photo side because I'm not a photographer, but Danny Boy's got a video, he's made a comparison as well. He talks a little bit more about the photo side of things, so I'll leave a link in the description if you wanted to go and check that out. And I also know that I haven't shown you that many images from the Lumix S5 Mark II in this video, so if you want to check out some more examples, definitely watch these 2 videos next, because I'll show you some more examples, the colours, and I deep dive a little bit further into the specs as well.